Mechanic says bore the engine. Don't rush, you might only need new rings, save time, money, and your engine. In this video I'll show the tests, the signs, and why boring is often unnecessary. Don't rush, many engines only need fresh rings. I'll explain the quick checks and save you money. Stay tuned for tests, clear signs, and smarter fixes than boring. Hi, I'm Ayaz. If your car uses oil fast, produces blue smoke, or has low compression, the usual knee-jerk answer is bore it. But in many engines the worn part is the piston rings, cheaper and faster to fix. I'll show you the symptoms, quick tests, and exactly what a mechanic should try before cutting metal. We'll cover symptoms, the exact test to run, and why a ring-first repair is often faster and cheaper than a full bore. Why do some mechanics immediately say, bore it? Because boring is a guaranteed fix for bore damage. It restores roundness and removes scoring. It's also a billable job and sometimes simpler when you don't have time to diagnose. But boring cuts metal, needs oversized pistons, and costs way more than ring replacement. So when your mechanic says bore it, take a breath and ask, have you done a wet compression test or a leak down? Those are quick and tell you a lot. Boring restores roundness after deep scoring or out-of-round bores. But it's costly and needs oversized pistons, so diagnose first. Often, worn rings cause the oil burn. Replacing rings after proper tests can solve it without cutting metal. Here are the most common signs that the rings, not the cylinder, are the real problem. I'll show real footage and exact phrases you might hear from your mechanic, and what they really mean. Blue smoke on startup or under acceleration usually means oil is getting past the rings and burning. That's rings or valve seal. Start with ring checks. If your oil level drops fast between services but there's no obvious leak, that's a red flag for worn rings. Blow by. Smell of exhaust in crankcase. Oil fouled on the oil cap. Points at rings sealing badly. A simple PCV or crankcase pressure check helps. If a wet compression test raises pressure, rings are the likely culprit. More on this in tests. Overheating alone isn't rings. But if overheating accompanies oil burning and smoking, and there's no coolant loss or visible head gasket failure, rings may be adding to the problem. Now don't take my word, test it. The next section shows tests you can do quickly to confirm whether rings are the issue. These tests are fast, inexpensive, and will save you money if they point to rings rather than a bored cylinder. Do a compression test on each cylinder and write the results down. If one cylinder is much lower, it could be a ring or valve. Now do a wet test. Add a teaspoon of oil to the cylinder and repeat. If compression rises significantly, rings are likely the problem. If the wet test jumps notably, think worn rings rather than valves. Record every cylinder's dry and wet numbers. Compare them. Big, wet gains strongly suggest ring sealing issues. A leak-down test shows where the pressure escapes, past rings, intake, exhaust valves, or head gasket. If most leakage is into the crankcase, it's rings. A leak-down test shows where the pressure escapes, past rings, intake, exhaust valves, or head gasket. If most leakage is into the crankcase, it's rings. A borescope lets you visually inspect the cylinder wall. If you see heavy scoring or deep scratches, you may need to rebore. If the wall is glazed but smooth, rings are more likely the problem. High crankcase pressure or oil soaked in the oil cap points to blow-by from worn rings. Don't work on a hot engine. Follow safety steps. If you're uncertain, a qualified home mechanic can help with these tests. If tests point to rings, this is the typical repair path. We'll show the high-level steps. This video is for education. If you do the job yourself, follow a repair manual and torque specs for your engine. Get correct rings for your engine, OEM or high-quality aftermarket. Piston ring pliers, torque, wrench, feeler gauges for ring end gap, a light cylinder hone per cylinder, ring compressor, cleaning solvent, and new gaskets. Drain oil and coolant. Remove head or remove oil pan depending on engine design. Remove pistons carefully. Keep pistons in order and label them. Inspect old rings and piston skirts. Often rings will be worn, broken, or have uneven wear. The piston skirt should show scoring if the bore caused wear. If skirt looks okay, rings are the main problem. Before installing new rings, check ring end gap by placing the ring in the cold cylinder and measuring gap with feeler gauges. If gap is too small or too large, select the correct rings. Do a light crosshatch hone to remove glaze and help the new rings seat. This is not reboring. We are not removing measurable material, just breaking the glaze. Use a torque plate, or follow instructions for your engine. Over-hone, chucked or rebore territory. Install rings with proper orientation and gaps. Use a ring compressor to reinstall pistons. Torque to spec, refill fluids and run the engine. A proper break-in is critical. Follow ring manufacturer or engine manual instructions, usually a mix of varying RPMs and light loads, and avoiding long steady speeds for the first 300-500 kilometers. Okay, can we do a wet compression and borescope first? If the borescope looks smooth and the wet test helps, let's replace rings and recheck before cutting metal. If the bore has deep scoring or is out of round beyond spec, boring is valid, but many times the bore is glazed or only slightly worn. Rings will fix it. Why? Was there contamination, poor oil, or overheating? Let's address root causes. Change oil, check PCV, and use correct rings. Rings don't just fail for no reason. Investigate oil type, PCV, and coolant leaks that contaminate oil. If the bore actually needs it, then yes. But if the bore is within spec, a full bore wastes money and materials. Let's follow diagnostic tests and choose the least invasive fix. Fix root causes. Correct oil and viscosity, healthy PCV, and proper cooling to prevent repeat ring wear. Now, for every mechanic who says bore it, here are common claims and how to respond smartly and politely. After you've replaced rings and done a light hone, watch these things: oil consumption, blue smoke, compression numbers, and crankcase pressure. Do an oil and filter change at the right interval and use the correct viscosity oil. Fix PCV issues and avoid overheating. Avoid long idles during break-in. Vary RPM, log compression and blow-by over time. And service oil and filter on schedule. So remember, test before you cut metal, blue smoke, oil consumption, and a wet compression test that improves pressure. Those point to rings. Borescope and measurements will tell you if the cylinder truly needs boring. Replace rings and do a light hone first. It's cheaper, and often fixes the problem. If that doesn't solve it, then consider boring. If you want the step-by-step how-to for a specific engine, tell me the make model, and I'll write a workshop-ready guide. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share this with someone who's been told, bore it, and saved hundreds.